We are happy to have come to this point in our conference. This is our final session where everyone is back together. And we're using this time to try to culminate everything we've gone over and present some investment opportunities to you today, most of which you saw on the tour, if you went on the trolley tour. And then some of it's just kind of dreaming into, as you saw in your packet, what the renderings show it would look like if someone did put some money into some of the properties. And then we're going to hear an update from our borough manager, Mark Flanders, about kind of the state of Pottstown, or just some highlights about Pottstown and why we believe that it's prime for revitalization and renaissance, just like we've seen in surrounding cities. And then, and we'll all introduce ourselves as we go, but then John Cromer is going to wrap up the session by sharing some about investment models and some of his thoughts from both his work in Philadelphia and just what he has seen in economic development that works when we come to a place like this where we're at in Pottstown. So thank you for hanging in there today. It's been great to have you all with us. And I'll just, at this point, hand it over to our borough manager, Mark Flanders.
Thank you, Twyla. So, Twyla asked me if I could give you an update on the good things that are going on in Pottstown, which are many, and I will apologize to some of you that were at the Chamber of Commerce luncheon a few weeks ago, because a lot of this is going to be repetitious for you, so bear with me, please. The good news, Drexel University's Lindy Institute for Urban Innovation has reported in the fourth quarter of 2016, for that one-year period, 15 to 16, Pottstown experienced a 26% increase in its median real estate sales prices. We actually placed 8th in regard to the gains in the 8-county suburban Philadelphia region. More good news, in the past 2 years, more than $5 million have been invested in the downtown for downtown property acquisitions. Many of you who have invested that money are sitting in this room. Thank you very much. And the cool thing is it's simply not for speculation. It's people that have plans to make something with the properties rather than letting them sit in the hope they can cash in later on a better investment. In regards to development, I think that many of you in this room would agree that the keys to economic revitalization in any community, Pottstown specifically, is through commercial redevelopment, with the understanding that the housing market will follow. And to that end, I want to let you know, those of you that aren't aware, Pottstown is open for business with a LERTA, a local economic revitalization tax abatement that provides for a 7-year progressive tax abatement on the property improvements. First year, 100%, and at the end of the 7th year, you're at 90%, and 8th year, it would be 100% of the taxes going forward. Pottstown is also in the process, we just met the other day, there's an ordinance in development stages to create a land bank to help move blighted and tax delinquent properties into the hands of pre-qualified developers, people like many of you sitting in this room. Talk to you quickly about some ongoing projects. Many of you may be aware of the new businesses that have been moving into Pottstown, but I just want to touch on some of the projects that are underway, and one of which is a Hanover Square commercial project, which is our South Hanover Street Gateway. That project has broken ground, and it will be a mixed-use and multi-family residential components. Complementing that, as part of a closed-loop traffic signal project, there will be a road diet on South Hanover Street that will go directly in front of the commercial portion of that project, which will change the traffic patterns on South Hanover Street from Chester County up to High Street. And any of you who have driven that very quickly can recognize why that needs to change. And it will also provide some parking along South Hanover Street, as like I said, will complement the commercial project. And I mentioned the closed loop traffic signal project. Somebody said to me last night at the dinner, I learned one thing about Pottstown that I don't like, and that is that you cannot get from one end of High Street to the other without stopping at every traffic signal. The closed loop project has been in progress for more than 15 years. It's undergone 2 iterations of ADA ramp requirements, which has required the project to be redesigned or re-engineered 3 times total. But nonetheless, it is underway, and it will result in the digitization of all traffic signals in downtown Pottstown, throughout the borough, throughout the townships that surround Pottstown, and it will give us the ability to control the traffic signals from a specific site at Borough Hall or at St. David's, where PennDOT has their traffic control center. So that is good news, and I am really hoping at the end of the project that you can actually go from one end of town to the other without stopping and going. Walk Bike Pottstown. Walk Bike Pottstown is a project that will create approximately 8 miles of bike routes throughout the borough of Pottstown. They will connect with the current lanes, the bike lanes that are on High Street, creating a walkable and bikeable connections between all of the Pottstown School District buildings, as well as the Schuylkill River Trail. The Schuylkill River Trail, which we heard mentioned last evening, currently runs from Pottsville to Pottstown, and there is a break in the trail between Pottstown and Chester County where it picks up again at Towpath Park in East Coventry Township. And although it's not totally paved yet in Chester County, it eventually hooks up in Phoenixville and then merges with the trail, and you can go all the way to the Art Museum in Philadelphia. The final leg of the trail, final Montgomery County leg of the trail, will begin construction from Riverfront Park in Pottstown to the Chester County line at Route 422 in early May. And once the bridge project on 422 is completed, that would be the project that we all enjoy going through the cattle chutes and the reduced speed limit on 422. When that bridge is done, there will be a pedestrian bike connection that will take you from Montgomery County across the river into Chester County, and Montgomery County will be completely connected. Borough Council several years ago recognized the importance of tourism to the economy of Pottstown, and Council created what is called the TREC District, or the Tourism and Recreation District. And with the financial assistance of the Montgomery County Commissioners, the district is finally beginning to attract some visitors. Some of you have probably already enjoyed the pleasures at the Carousel of Pottstown, have ridden the Colebrookdale Railroad. Pottstown is in the business of mini golf. If anyone's interested, it's a pretty neat family experience. We have the Pottsgrove Mansion and the direct connection to the Schuylkill River Trail along with Memorial Park. We are in the process of acquiring funding to take care of some pedestrian connections from Memorial Park to the activities that border King and High Street, and will ultimately connect you down to the Schuylkill River Trail. I also want to let you know that the borough is every other year is investing between $3 and $5 million on its infrastructure. We're trying to replace 1% of our water and sewer system per year. In 2020, when the borough authority's bonds are paid off and they expire, we will then be investing between $3 and $5 million a year and plan to speed up the process. I also want to talk to you about the KEEP project, the Keystone Employment and Economic Plan. KEEP is a collaborative effort between the Borough of Pottstown, West Pottsgrove Township, and the Montgomery County Planning Commission. The plan is to create a new and vibrant employment center in our southwest corner, the area that borders Riverfront Park, the Schuylkill River, Keystone Boulevard. And the plan is to use the project to maximize the area through public and private partnerships. There's about 255 acres of multiple acre parcels that are either vacant or underutilized. Previously, most of those parcels were of an industrial purpose, and they connect Pottstown and West Pottsgrove. Keystone Boulevard dead ends currently in the borough of Pottstown. There's a trail that goes through West Pottsgrove. It parallels the Schuylkill River Trail. This project, ultimately, the area could serve as a gateway and a line to Route 422's interchange in Stowe, which would give road access all the way through into West Pottsgrove. Currently, with Commonwealth Finance Authority funding of around $200,000, I think it's through the local share account, and the County Redevelopment Authority's contribution of $67,000, an engineering study is underway, an environmental study also, which will lead to the creation of what's known as a specific plan, so that developers don't have to deal with the zoning requirements of the two separate municipalities. The plan will be specific for the KEEP area, and you only have to, it's one-stop shopping. Eventually, that will go to an RFI. We're going to reach out to you and say, here's basically the phase 1 and phase 2 study. Tell us what you want to do with the project, and we're going to go from there. We expect that the planning effort for that project should wrap up in the summer of this year. And it's going to provide the necessary case for public support and hopefully make an attractive project for you, the developers. The final thing I just want to touch on is that thing known as perception, and I think we heard that mentioned in a couple of the sessions this morning. We all know that the perception is the reality to the individual that has it, And as we continue to move forward, we need to change the negative perceptions of Pottstown. We need to tell the real story. One of the perceptions is that Pottstown is not safe. The criminals are everywhere. That is not so. But to those who still hold on to that perception, I want to tell you that in 2016, the Part 1 crime rate, Part 1 crimes are the crimes that when you watch the Philadelphia news, you hear about the shootings, you hear about the rapes, you hear about the robberies that are occurring in the city, across America, sadly. But nonetheless, Part 1 crimes in Pottstown decreased 14% in 2016. I attribute that to the quality work of the men and women of the Pottstown Police Department, and I also attribute it to the assistance that we're getting from the Montgomery County District Attorney, Kevin Steele. DA Steele created a community prosecution unit. I believe one of the representatives was here this morning. I don't think she's here any longer. However, it's a group of district attorneys, assistant district attorneys, who are assigned to Pottstown. They only handle Pottstown cases. They're embedded in the community. They attend many events in Pottstown, interact with Pottstown residents and businesses. And at the same time, the district attorney made a very substantial commitment with funds from asset forfeiture and seizure funding to put video camera system in Pottstown. Currently, the system is in place. It's incredible, the detailed resolution of the camera, and it's already showing the benefits in that we've gotten images of people either in the process of committing crime or people who had committed crime, and we were able to identify them rapidly and effect an arrest. That system is designed to be built out with approximately 25 to 30 more cameras, and we're going to add cameras into the system as funds, both public and private, from both public and private sources come forward. Another perception that I want to touch on is one that is probably near and dear to many of you, and that is that our licensing and inspections department, our codes department, if you will, is difficult to deal with. I want to tell you, I pray that that's a thing of the past. We worked very hard to get it where it needs to be. Our director of licensing and inspections, I believe, is sitting in the back there wondering what I'm going to say next. We've streamlined our permitting process, and the big thing that I've seen has made the most difference is that we now meet with developers before the plan is submitted. We don't charge you for that pre-submittal meeting. The purpose, I'd prefer to see it happen all the way back at the concept phase, but sometimes we wait till we go to our design experts, but nonetheless, is to identify possible roadblocks and develop methodologies ahead of time to address issues before they become issues. So those of you that are thinking about entering into some type of development in Pottstown, please remember to contact us, even if it's concept. We do not charge you. There are no fees, inspection fees up front for sitting down and going through the process ahead of time. We've also hired a new borough engineer, which seems to have affected a lot of change for the community of Pottstown. Cedarville Engineering, I believe April's here, or she was here, April Barchese. The cool thing about Cedarville Engineering is they have a presence in Pottstown. They are a community-based company, and they have a stake in the community. Having a stake in the community, being a neighbor, has made a heck of a difference when it comes to dealing with developer and engineer relationships. The last item that I want to touch on in regard to perception is that there's no teamwork in Pottstown. There's no collaboration in Pottstown. I have a whole list of things I could go through, but I think that the discussions that we had last night, the comments we had last night, and what I observed in the room last night and what I've observed today, I think we pretty much debunked that one without going into detail. So frankly, in my mind, this is an exciting time. I've had the pleasure of speaking with a lot of you in this room, and many of you share that you believe there's change in the air, that Pottstown is gaining momentum. I'm here to tell you I believe we're on the verge of something big, and I don't see it stopping. So, last thing I have on the topic of momentum, Peggy Lee Clark, the interim executive director of PAID, asked me to selfishly make a prompt that in the back of or I guess at the table out there or the counter out there where you signed in, and when I speak of Pottstown gaining momentum, there is a publication that is put out by the partners in Pottstown, the Hill School, the Borough, the hospital, the community college, school district, and several others. It's known as the Momentum, and there are copies of Momentum back there for you to grab on your way out. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Isn't that encouraging? It's always really great to hear. Yeah, it is good stuff, and I think it's a good reason why you should invest in Pottstown. If you're not already, to just not only for yourself or to tell people that you meet in Westchester and Philadelphia and Lancaster, Phoenixville, surrounding areas, to take a look at Pottstown. That's how the buzz starts and grows, and that's really how the word spreads, and then we keep hearing success stories. So it's very exciting. I'm going to move on to some Hobart's Run investment opportunities, and then at the end there are also some from the downtown. And we tried to briefly highlight them on the tour. I think the renderings are in your packets as well, so you might have already seen them. But the first property that I want to highlight is one that's actually owned by the Hill School. It was purchased some time ago, from what I understand, possibly as part of the master plan. At this point, we want to find a way to better utilize it as a resource in the community. While nothing has been decided exactly about how this will happen, we are looking at different possibilities. And so one that makes a lot of sense would be to just have it be a community collaborative rehab efforts involving neighbors on Walnut Street and in Hobart's Run, involving some Hill School kids, some Pottstown High School kids. It gets a little more difficult when you have teenagers working on a rehab, but there's ways to do that and certainly can teach some great life skills. We also talked about making it a bit of a business incubator as far as how do you take a house like this, which is a gut rehab, to something that with your own hands you help to rehab and then bring up the market value and then help to get someone in there and see it make money. So we can look at developing a model around that. So if you have any ideas, we're listening to them all at this point. I did meet with Genesis Housing, with Mosaic Community Land Trust, with Habitat for Humanity, and they would all be on board as well as far as lending their expertise to this kind of rehab project. So it could just really turn out to be a great collaborative effort if we go that route. But it is right here. We passed it on the tour, and we hope that that will be turned around this spring, summer, fall. I have an estimated cost up there of $40,000. That is assuming a lot of things are donated. So there is a certain amount of labor and materials that need to go into it in the beginning to get it safe to work in for kids and just community members. But as a gut rehab, it does need quite a bit of work. The next slide, we drove past, and Peggy Lee and I kind of were joking with each other about the use of this. I have to actually give Brian Kelly from Right Now Property Solutions creds for this idea. When he walked through it on the Hobart's Run home tours, he's like, this is a great co-working space. And I think it's true, and thought about that more in Hobart's Run is we're trying to bring not only the idea of a business incubator, but just folks together in one space, sharing resources, but having separate offices. And so this building, which is in Hobart's Run near High Street, would be perfect for that. There's ample space for conference rooms as well, and there's good parking outside, and so it needs a little bit of sprucing up perhaps, but this was a rendering that's more of the description of it. This was the rendering that was done of it. So it's on the market, I think, for $210. Matt Green, I don't know if he's still here, is the listing agent, and he assured me that it could come down quite a bit from that if there were serious buyers. And then the building that we stopped at on the trolley tour that has sparked quite a bit of interest, and really it's a bit of a complicated acquisition just because it's bank owned, but is this what I consider to be an anchor property on High Street in Hobart's Run, probably the one with the most potential in many ways. It's right across from the Hill School. It was for sale in January. The listing agreement expired, and so now it's just kind of, you'd have to negotiate with the bank directly. I think they were asking $475,000 for it. If you walk through it, you will quickly see that they will never get that. It's again 3 parcels, but a gut rehab, and needs probably modestly $300,000 worth of work. It was advertised as 19 units, very, very small units. More feasibly, they should be about 8 units, and then there are 3 storefronts. So I think there's a couple things there that I just went over. It is bank-owned. Like I said, it makes it a little more difficult, but this is the rendering that shows what it could look like, and I would add gooseneck lighting to that because I think it would look amazing. But anyway, it has a lot of potential, and I'm really, really hoping this year to just see that transformed, because the Devicon group, are you guys still here? I think they left. But they are right next, across the street, and they bought 3 parcels there and fixed them up nicely, and it's just down from Giuseppe's Pizza, and so we could really get a nice group of commercial real estate and retail activity going there. These houses we stopped to look at briefly. I was contacted by the one owner, and then the other owner via that owner said that he would also be willing to sell. So I'm meeting with them next week. They were on vacation this week, but she did say, go ahead and put it up there, because if you find a buyer, we'd be willing to sell. And so this is really close to campus and could be used for a variety of things. It could be a bed and breakfast. It could be just what it was before, was just 2 twins, and be rented out, or be used for staff housing here, additional housing for our workers on staff. So it's right by campus, and they're both fairly large lots. They back up to the Edgewood Elementary Center property. Another rendering that came through for that, I'm guessing from the looks of it, would be if it were converted to a big single-family home. And then we have the infamous pink houses. And I can't tell you, there's like 12 people, not even today, but just over the past 6 months, that have said, keep them pink, keep them pink. It's like the Hobart's Run pink house thing. And I'm like, no, they're not going to be pink. They're terrible. But these homes are on the market, overpriced in my opinion. They need to probably just, I don't know, acquired for what price. But one idea that would make sense, I believe, is to acquire them, raise them, and then build new construction to match the homes across the street. And that would kind of complete that block with the newer construction. These homes and the one to the left of it are the only that look like they do. And so it could just greatly improve that corner. Also around the corner from these pink houses, and we haven't found the reason why, but there is a consistent pocket of crime. So ever since I started in January, every single month, half of the crimes in Hobart's Run happen on Jefferson, right around the corner. So we need to, the DA's office knows about that, the chief of police knows about it. We just haven't really figured out what it is. It seems to stay right there, but just another reason to clean the blight and transform that block. Then we did stop briefly and look at the Sheridan Street homes, one of which is owned by Keith and Krista Costello, who are still here. They own the last one on Beach and Sheridan. And so about 70% of these homes are rented out, and then the rest are owned by folks who don't live too far away. Not all of them are from Pottstown, they have lived there for a long time. And they bought them from folks that had not lived in Pottstown, but were selling them to people who wanted to move into the area. So they want to hold on to their homes, and then the renters, the landlords also seem like they want to own them. So in this case, we're looking at a facade renovation project for all 8 of them, and it would just really spruce up when you drive onto campus, into the CFTA parking lot on Beach Street. It would really just highlight those homes in a beautiful way. So right now, mostly what it needs is like new porch roofs, and the porches themselves are wooded and kind of decaying, and paint on the porch floors, and some landscaping. It wouldn't take a whole lot, but would go a long way in making that look beautiful. The empty lot on Beach Street, I think I mentioned, again, open to ideas about how to develop that. It is owned by the Hill School, but we could do anything from build new construction there to mirror the faculty housing on the street behind it. I think that would probably make the most sense for what it's currently zoned for. We have the two on Walnut Street that I told you I would touch on later. So they're right now both in pretty utter disrepair. One is bank-owned, the other one's in short sale. I believe you could probably acquire them both for $90,000, but that's just to acquire them. So then they would need still quite a bit of work. But again, if we are to dream into it, which renderings allow us to do very nicely, they would look beautiful fixed up. Now we'll move briefly into some downtown investment opportunities. How many of you are from Pottstown or have been here long enough to have eaten a hot dog at the very best wiener shop? Yeah, I had one or two a couple years ago right before they closed. So everyone was sad when they closed, and it's sitting there now, and our downtown improvement district manager says that it's bank-owned, from what she understands. The owners are very difficult to get in touch with, and so we don't actually know what the asking price for this is, but we know that it does need to be purchased and turned into something lovely, perhaps another hot dog shop. Because it's been that for a long time, and we miss the good hot dogs with chili on them. So Ellis Mills, is Scott Bentley still here? There he is, sorry, right there. So this was news to me, and I added it last night after our conversation because we were at the same table together, and we were talking about Ellis Mills and that I was going to be presenting some properties downtown. He's like, I would sell it. I'm like, you would? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, for how much? Because everybody wants to know how much. And then, so I did take your kind of loosely thrown out figure, and he was like, I think 350 would do it. So I took your word for it and put it up there. But so that on the tour, we did stop briefly and see the Ellis Mills building, and for the sake of time, I'm not going to go into it too much, except that, well, I can't even because I haven't been through it. Shame on me. I have not walked through the whole thing yet, but I hear that it is absolutely gorgeous inside, that the best and highest use for that would be a restaurant. So we are hoping to get, actually, I just heard of a showing next week, hopefully through someone from Westchester will be possibly going through that. We'll move on to 205 East High Street. That is on the market for $250,000. Former bank building, has some stuff up there for you to look over. It is in need of a lot of TLC, but also just has a ton of character and opportunity for the downtown. There's 211 East High Street, which is the mainline financial building. It's on the market for a whopping $549,000. That may sit for a while, but it is actually really beautiful inside and needs no work. It's gorgeous, move-in condition, redone very nicely. Then we have 241 East High Street, and this one is fully rented. We did stop and see this one on the tour as well. So that would just be taking over all the tenants and everything in it, making the income from it. But I think Sheila's 180 they went for that. And then the former Prince's Bakery, which we stopped at briefly as well on the first tour, and then the second one we took another route because we wanted to see the Beach Street factory building. But we stopped here on the first tour. So this one they only went $80,000 for, and it covers like the whole block, and has two original brick ovens in it. Needs some work. This is the picture of one of the brick ovens. But still has a lot of the bakery components there and has some retail space as well, so has some apartments. Really, for $80,000, so much potential, and it's not far from the library and High Street. So that is what I'll end with, and I'll also just have this slide with information on Sheila Dugan, who is our Main Street manager, Peggy Lee Clark, who is the interim executive director of PAID, and myself. So we try to meet about every 2 weeks. We brainstorm a lot, and we talk about investment opportunities and partnership opportunities, and between the three of us have a grand old time and have gotten some good things up and running. So feel free to contact any of us for further questions about these investment opportunities. And because Erica is here and Ed, I just want to also mention the Beach Street factories, which are, I think, not fully rented, right? So on Beach Street, when you leave, if you didn't come in that way, just go down a few more blocks and you'll see a beautifully redone, it was the old Pomeroy's building, I believe, 42 units, 43 units, I was close, and artist housing and it's just changed that whole block, and it's going to change the neighborhood around it. So please stop and look at that. But there are still some apartments for rent there as well. And with that, I give it to John.
Great. Well, I just wanted to conclude with a few big picture remarks and then a couple of comments about possible future opportunities for this group and for others who are interested. This is my favorite slide. This is a map of Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission projections for population growth over the next quarter century, which in this projection began, I guess, a couple of years ago. As you can see, not surprisingly, a lot of growth is projected to occur along 422 in the Schuylkill River. And that high level of growth really stops short of Pottstown, but I would argue that is not a bad thing. As you know, a lot of the growth that has happened already is not of the highest quality, both the retail and the residential. Population is projected to increase in Pottstown and the surrounding area, but I think unlike a lot of those other built-up areas, you can have it both ways. You can be ambitious about attracting new development on vacant parcels, but you can also be reasonable and strategic about how existing properties are going to be adapted for reuse in the 21st century. Most of the other communities in that dark blue area can't do that. And for some of them, it's too late. So I really share the feeling of optimism that has been expressed last evening and today. Some of you were involved in a meeting a couple of months ago in which some of the focus was on Hobart's Run and the new entity that Twyla directs, and the question of, well, what is this going to be? What's it going to do? As I understand it, it is and will be a nonprofit. It will be a 501c3 organization. But there were questions about, well, what about real estate development? What about liability? What about funding from government and how that relates to the Hill School? And as I think many of you know, there are a lot of great examples of how that can be done. It's not that difficult. You need your lawyer and accountant. But in many parts of the region, there are nonprofit organizations that are also housing developers that are making money, that own properties, that rent and sell properties. So that's a common thing. Some of them do it directly through the nonprofit, which is the developer. Many others do this through a related LLC that they create specifically for the purpose of completing a specific project. Others, in many cases, actually create an affiliated private corporation in which the nonprofit owns a majority of the stock, and they partner with a for-profit developer. So none of these things are new, and they're all options. What has to be mentioned, though, is that the business model for an organization like this is really different from the 20th century business model, in which a lot more government funding was available. There were charitable foundations that were into the idea of funding bricks and mortar costs and operational costs for nonprofit organizations and community development corporations. That's really not happening to the extent that it would be feasible to make an expectation about those sources of funding for a new entity that was associated with the Hill School. The government funding is in very short supply, and that will continue to be the case. Funding through the federal housing programs is currently being made available, when there's an opportunity to do so, to organizations like Habitat and Genesis Housing, and I don't think we would want to start a competition with them. The low-income housing tax credit, which really is the major source of funding for affordable rental housing, is also in short supply, and the competition for tax credit funding is ferocious, such that if we were to agree on a project this afternoon, and if everything went perfectly, we might expect to get the financing 3 years from now or so. So I think you're thinking about another kind of approach, and there are some great opportunities to think of alternatives. You have, 3 high-performing nonprofit organizations that are reliable producers of housing, and so opportunities for joint ventures are much greater than they are in other places where the nonprofit and community development corporation situation is a lot more dicey. In addition, in Philadelphia, the Reinvestment Fund is an organization that underwrites unconventional projects, both residential and commercial. It's been in business for decades, and it's worked nationally. So they're familiar with Pottstown. They, I know, would be interested in brainstorming some of the opportunities that are now a little bit edgy, but seem like prospects for the next 5 years or so, and they're available. They're smart, and they're a great source of advice. In addition, there are some opportunities for both nonprofit and private developers that have emerged fairly recently. Mark has mentioned the land bank approval. The land bank legislation was approved statewide not too long ago, and many municipalities are just getting started in determining whether and how to implement it. But the key to that legislation, in my mind, is that a land bank has an opportunity to acquire a property that is posted for tax collection sale, the public auction, without having to bid against the other participants in the tax sale. So under certain conditions and with the approval of the taxing authorities, a land bank can come to tax sale and get authorization to remove a property that's strategically located in Pottstown from the list without having to go up against the speculators and the others who may not have the same motivation in mind. So that's a relatively new opportunity, and it's worth taking a look at. In addition, Pennsylvania approved legislation for what's called conservatorship. It's Pennsylvania's name for receivership, but it's a process through which an individual or certain nonprofits and certain private developers can petition the court to allow a qualified third party to take control of a neglected vacant property and fix it up, and under some circumstances take control of it, find tenants from it, operate it, and eventually take title to it. So conservatorship is a very, relative to older approaches like eminent domain, it's a relatively inexpensive, relatively fast-track way of acquiring a vacant, neglected property, and then there's some great examples of how to do that. So there are some opportunities. In addition, many of you heard the presentation about the state tax credit program, the neighborhood assistance program. That could be a great source of funding both for operations as well as for projects. One thing I just want to mention in closing that I think you're all aware of is that the control of real estate is really going to be critical in the years going forward. You already know that this area has a lot of potential as an attractive real estate market. A lot of other people are going to wise up to that during the coming years, and you've got an opportunity to take control of properties that aren't so attractive now and sort of influence their future. I was really struck by the comment this morning about the opportunity to bring a Blockbuster video into a Lancaster factory. I think Paul Fulmer mentioned it. It was turned down, fortunately, and I think that space is now occupied by a great restaurant. So making decisions like that really make sense and are guided by a sense of the appropriate approach for Pottstown, I think is really important and something to consider going forward. In neighborhood commercial areas, you can see the effects of good and bad decision making about property disposition. Many of you are familiar with Manayunk, and Manayunk really got started because a developer, Dan Neddickson, bought up a lot of properties and courted restaurants to occupy storefront properties. The sort of counterexample of that is Germantown Avenue and Chestnut Hill, where a less perceptive investor bought up a lot of properties and had his own ideas about what was appropriate. Many of those storefronts are still vacant. So figuring out how to encourage communication between those people who own property now and want to do something with them, or ideally, and this is an ideal, creating a capital fund that would acquire and land bank properties for future disposition would be great. That costs money. We don't know where the money would come from at this point, but clearly there are investment opportunities here, and finding ways to acquire and hold and control the disposition and reuse of properties, I think would be an excellent high priority activity.